And so I'm supposed to do what is a haphazardly concoction by understanding how much that would be a death shot, and as a hypothesis doing this to quantum phenomenon being exerted on galactical objects. 1, 2, 3, go. The Mandela effect with a gyroscope is a sweet. But my shadow has some red in the middle. And look at the pickup on the curb. That's what a cheat code does with hotkeys in a different angle. Kind of funny how like the bulk of particles in the universe are hydrogen, and so the most common ones would have been the ones that were made first, right? The argument of the world is the oyster, and then you're presenting to the judge, you would bring the world's largest oyster and say, see, this is, the fruits of our excavate. And then the judge would have been, oh my gosh, well, you're going to be able to walk free because this is actually, he's legitimately saying this. The world is an oyster. What about flat earth? What thing would you bring to the table to make the judge be of allowance? Jesus said, my people perish from the lack of knowledge. Well, what if no one was smart enough to know that sweet spot in order for it to get encapsulated with all this lighting about engraves that in? And so galaxies, they've all come from an interstellar medium where it was a whole bunch of clouds, and then they coalesced and formed into individual ones. When there's like these odd things that occur around them, such as quasars blasting off, or parts of intergalactic material in between galaxies, it reads as deviations in parts of the galaxy having extra conformities, and the more that these are looked at as a formality of the galaxy as opposed to an extra appendage, the information gets mishmashed and fudged. It's the science communities who think that in order to protect a contemporary theory, that these anomalies are within reason. However, the more that... So there's extragalactical objects in between galaxies, and the more that these are seen to be parts that are a combination of the rotation, them orbiting each other, is malpractice of focal lensing. But I will give it to Fauci. He had the right approach at the very start with bending a curve, because a curve is something that we can all picture, but it's just he went from step 1 to being good, and then to step 2 as in catastrophic failure, quantizing the curve with all these red dots across the map as a death toll, and the explanation from 1 to 2, and then leaving it at 2 for the duration of, who knows, maybe forever. That is it completely just how, yes, that's the death of the galaxies when they went out from the interstellar medium and started coalescing within their own making planets, because surely the stars within their galaxies are going to go out individually, and they probably would have stayed lit longer, feeding off each other in a high energy within the interstellar medium, but they got pushed apart because space is expanding. And so that is the same, but then it would be arguing for the embracing a continuous creation when it's not even evident. I've been eyeballing this piece of trash on the road for the last 4 days, and it's all to describe how brilliant stopping power is. End caps. Now, instead of explaining how there's two marshmallows together with the top one having a point on it, why not just look at it? This is only as good as the things that come before it because it's a stopping power. But how much is a transgression? You know, a progression in two different routes of this point and then this crevice, both in one end cap, would suggest that it's midpoint and then an O-ring in definition of the two questioning. Whoa, that was sick. And so I'm supposed to do what is a haphazardly concoction by understanding how much that would be a death shot, and as a hypothesis doing this to quantum phenomenon being exerted on galactical objects. You know, 1, 2, 3, go. The Mandela effect with a gyroscope is a sweet spot in order for it to get encapsulated. With all this lighting about, engraves that in. Dark energy. I mean, that, but then more importantly, dark matter. Both of them together. But the main impetus is that the galaxies have extra weight behind them, and they have like this, I don't want to say exoskeleton, but it's literally a representation of that, because when they collide they see like this extra like foreshadow that has a whole bunch of weight to it that prescribes all the objects within it. So it stark resemblance, as if you were to see that this has the extra. I think capitalizing off misses means that you can double jump stuff, but if nature's already doing this naturally, how much can you capitalize off that naturalness so then it's original? The originality is one thing that bad things miss because evil people don't think smart. That's why you can see them a mile away sticking out like a sore thumb. The reptilian brain is inferior to the two lobes on either end. But out of all seriousness, that would be the ultimate way of getting your hand stuck in the cookie jar, but then just explaining how much the world is your oyster, and so that everything's a cookie jar. It's, you know, you gotta have thresholds. The argument of the world is the oyster, and then you're presenting to the judge, you would bring the world's largest oyster and say, see, this is, you know, the fruits of our excavade. And then the judge would have been, oh my gosh, well, you're going to be able to walk free because this is actually, he's legitimately saying this. The world is an oyster. What about flat earth? What thing would you bring to the table to make the judge be of allowance? Jesus said, my people perish from the lack of knowledge. Well, what if no one was smart enough to know that they're engaging in their own demise? So then someone getting caught red-handed serving out a death shot would have said, well, I've got, you know, the keys to outstanding. The aftermath of those two effects, what if it was red in the clouds, like after a thunderbolt hits a pile of gunpowder, it would leave a cloud in that instance. But how much are all the clouds around equal to the cloud of that event? Proportional over time. Would the ultimate randomization be the control of the weather? And for no odd reason, if people were controlling land that was affecting the weather, it would be almost as a forest fire started by an arson or a
scientist who handles concoctions that are made up of things that could end humanity.